From a sadistic hotelier to a cannibal killer, the US has been home to some of the most vicious murderers throughout history, and the true identity of one remains a mystery to this day. Today, the story of H.H. Holmes seems difficult to believe. The idea of a sprawling murder castle built by a bloodthirsty con man seems fantastical, but a look at one of America's first serial killers indicates that at least part of the legend was real. Born Herman Mudgett in the mid-19th century, young H.H. Holmes was reportedly very intelligent, yet nearly dropped out of medical school before making his way to Chicago. There he worked as a pharmacist and hotel proprietor, an especially profitable enterprise in 1893 with the World's Columbian Exposition coming to town. Holmes is said to have installed an elaborate network of hidden passageways, secret rooms, and killing devices in his hotel.
When all eyes were on the World's Fair, no eyes were on him.
In Holmes' own self-aggrandizing memoir, he confessed to killing 22 victims, but it's more likely that he killed around 9 people, including at least 4 children. Even so, Holmes wasn't taken down by the supposedly Poe-like horrors of his murder mansion. Instead, good old insurance fraud did him in. But when he was arrested, police found evidence indicating that he'd killed a business associate, Benjamin Pitezel, and Pitezel's 3 children. Holmes was executed for Pitezel's murder in May 1896. On the surface, Herb Baumeister appeared to lead a normal existence, complete with a wife, 3 children, and a sprawling Indiana estate known as Fox Hollow Farm. But Baumeister also led a secret second life.
This Christmas, all that I want is world peace.
When his family was out of town, Baumeister is believed to have gone to Indianapolis gay bars, picked up single men, brought them home, killed them, and disposed of their remains nearby. In fact, in 1994, his son found a human skull on the property, but Baumeister brushed it off as an old anatomy specimen he discarded in the woods. His wife, Julie, didn't immediately report the gruesome find to the police, but investigators were already looking into a number of men who'd gone missing in the area.
We just had information about, gee, all these guys are missing and no crime scenes, no nothing really.
When they began to focus on Baumeister, he ran. Herb Baumeister died by suicide in a Canadian park in July 1996. Investigators found a shocking number of bones in the woods behind the Baumeister home. Just 9 victims have been identified, but it's believed Baumeister killed at least 25 and perhaps more. Remains were being found at Fox Hollow Farm as recently as 2023. The title of most prolific American serial killer may belong to Samuel Little, who, according to the FBI, likely told the truth when he confessed to killing 93 people between 1970 and 2005. Little was frequently apprehended during that period, typically for charges like assault and theft, but was often released. But in 2014, he was found guilty of the murders of Carol Alford, Guadalupe Apodaca, and Audrey Nelson Everett as a result of DNA evidence. He began serving a life sentence later that year and died in prison in 2020 at age 80.
The reason Sam Little went undetected for so many years is because of who he targeted.
Little's victims were often low-income black sex workers and drug users who were frequently written off as unreliable witnesses or whose deaths were deemed unworthy of investigation. Some of Little's victims were never found or even named, though he confessed to their killings toward the end of his life and drew portraits of some of them from his prison cell.
They're so accurate that family members have recognized lost loved ones from them.
Other victims had been found years earlier, but their deaths had been dismissed as overdoses or accidents, at least until Little began to talk. John Wayne Gacy has become a strange figure in American culture, with his violent string of murders contrasting with a seemingly normal facade. It was so normal, in fact, that he performed as a clown for fundraisers and parties, was an active community member, and was even a local politician.
One time he looked at me and he said, well, you know, clowns get away with murder.
He also had a past that included childhood sexual assault, poor health, and discrimination based on sexuality. In 1968, Gacy was accused of sexually assaulting an underage boy, which led to a 10-year prison sentence and a divorce from his wife.
When he went to prison, he was a model prisoner. Those people in Iowa could not say enough nice things about him.
He was paroled after only 18 months, faced further charges, escaped conviction, and then started a second life as a contractor. Though he remarried and had a successful business, Gacy reportedly still assaulted young men and began his killings in January 1972, when he stabbed teen Timothy McCoy after a sexual encounter in Gacy's home. By 1978, Gacy was finally connected to a victim, and police began to focus an investigation on him. A search of his Norwood Park, Illinois home uncovered victims' belongings, syringes, and weapons. There was also the small matter of the 29 bodies on his property, including some that were buried in the crawl space directly beneath the home. 4 more sets of remains found nearby were also attributed to Gacy. After his arrest in December 1978, Gacy admitted to an estimated 30 of those deaths and was executed by lethal injection in 1994. Between 1970 and 1973, young men and boys in the Houston area went missing with little or no explanation, leaving families bereft and with precious few answers regarding what happened to their loved ones. Then, in August 1973, the terrible truth came out. Dean Corll, who helped manage his family's candy factory and lived a seemingly unremarkable life, was in fact a vicious serial killer. His crimes were finally uncovered after he was shot to death in a Houston suburb.
And the only reason they got caught was because of a falling out between Corll and his accomplices.
Corll's killer was Wayne Henley, a teenage boy and one half of a duo who assisted Corll in finding victims. The other was another teen, David Brooks. Perhaps boosted by bribes Corll offered to Henley and Brooks, the trio scouted boys as young as 13, urging them to enter Corll's vehicle with offers of a ride or party invitation. Once at another location, Corll would restrain, brutally assault, and kill the victims. Sometimes he would also force the victim to write or call their parents, falsely claiming to be safe. Brooks and Henley later confessed that they helped Corll move and bury victims' bodies, some of which belonged to their friends. At the time, 27 deaths were linked to Corll, but later DNA testing found another, bringing his total number of known murders to 28. Henley and Brooks both received life sentences for their parts in the killings. From 1974 to 1991, the BTK killer brought terror to Wichita, Kansas by killing an estimated 10 people. It began with the murders of the Otero family, including parents Julie and Joseph and two of their children, 11-year-old Josie and 9-year-old Joey. They were found by the surviving Otero children. Later that year, BTK placed an unsigned confession in a library book referencing his preferred method to bind them, torture them, kill them, and giving rise to the BTK moniker. Once news media took the story on, the killer engaged in an occasional back and forth with reporters, sending a poem to one outlet and even telephoning police to report one 1977 killing. He sometimes seemed eager for the attention, whining to one TV station in 1977,
BTK began today's letter with a question. How many do I have to kill before I get a name in the paper or some national attention?
BTK last killed in 1991, leaving the case to seemingly turn cold. But 2004 news reports on the anniversary of the Otero family murders pushed him to begin contacting the media and police again. One package sent by the killer included a disc that authorities traced back to Dennis Rader, a control-focused family man, active church member, and Boy Scout troop leader. Further investigation and DNA testing, using a sample provided by Rader's daughter, led to his February 25, 2005 arrest. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms. Like other serial killers, Gary Ridgway preyed on some of the most vulnerable people in society, targeting those whose transient lives would make their disappearances less likely to gain attention. For Ridgway, those victims were typically young women running away from home or working as sex workers in and around King County, Washington. Starting in 1982, Ridgway began picking them up and killing them, depositing their remains near the Green River, and earning the moniker of the Green River Killer. For nearly 20 years, he evaded capture. Ridgway was caught in 2001 when DNA testing conclusively linked him to genetic material recovered from some of the women's remains, and was charged with the murders of 4 women. In 2003, 3 additional murder charges were added, including one for Ridgway's first known victim, Wendy Lee Caulfield.
Some, called me, the evil and the devil, and Satan.
Ridgway later stated that he may have killed as many as 80, but it's unclear if he was genuinely confessing or simply out to get more attention from investigators and the press. To avoid execution, he agreed to lead investigators to more remains and pleaded guilty to 48 counts of aggravated murder in the first degree. Ridgway was sentenced to life in prison in 2003. As of 2024, investigators are still working to identify individuals whose remains are connected to the case. The sheer brutality of Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes is so shocking that he's remained a ghoulish figure in American culture decades after his 1994 death. Beginning in 1978 and continuing until he was finally apprehended in 1991, Dahmer largely targeted the gay community in and around Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His first victim, a teenage hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, established a common pattern for Dahmer, who incapacitated Hicks with alcohol and a blow to the head before strangling him. Starting with his victim Anthony Sears in 1989, Dahmer began retaining human remains. He also became increasingly ritualistic and attempted to lobotomize victims. In May 1991, he was nearly caught when 14-year-old Konarak Syntha escaped Dahmer's apartment. Police intercepted Syntha, who was nude and disoriented, then handed him back to Dahmer when the killer said that Syntha was his drunk boyfriend. Dahmer had previously been convicted in 1988 of sexually assaulting Syntha brother.
This wasn't a couple of months or a couple of weeks. This went on for years.
Police looked around Dahmer's apartment, but their investigation was exceedingly poor. They missed the remains of Tony Hughes, which were clearly visible in one room. After police left, Dahmer proceeded to kill Cynthia Sampone. 4 more men would die before police finally arrested Dahmer on July 22, 1991, after Tracy Edwards came forward with the claim that he had been drugged. When police actually investigated Dahmer's apartment, they found a ghoulish array of human remains.
All he said to me is, "Why don't you just shoot me now for what I did?"
Dahmer was arrested and ultimately confessed to killing 17 people. He was killed in prison by a fellow inmate in 1994. Ted Bundy's first confirmed killing happened in February 1974, when he murdered 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy of Seattle. He killed 11 more women in 1974 alone, at least according to Bundy's confession. In August 1975, he was arrested in Utah, but even though officers found objects like gloves, masks, rope, and handcuffs in his car, Bundy was released on bail in short order. He was arrested again in October 1975 after Carol DeRanche identified him as her failed abductor in a 1974 incident. He was eventually also charged with the murder of Karen Campbell, but while on trial in 1977 in Colorado, he escaped twice and eventually found himself on the run. By January 1978, Bundy was in Tallahassee, Florida, where he targeted the Chi Omega sorority in a brutal attack. Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy were killed, while 2 other women were seriously injured. Bundy left the sorority, attacked another woman in her apartment, then escaped.
I thought that he was going to kiss me. Instead, he said very quietly, "Do you know what? I'm going to kill you."
Less than a month later, he killed 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, who was to be his last victim before his arrest on February 15, 1978. Bundy was convicted of 3 murders, confessed to 28, and was executed in Florida in 1989. What if a serial killer is never caught? That's the case with the Zodiac Killer, whose 1968-1969 murders of at least 5 people in California spawned wild media speculation and widespread fear. Some suggest that the 1963 shooting deaths of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards in Santa Barbara County were done at the hands of the killer. Some also believe that he's responsible for the 1966 death of Riverside City College student Sherry Jo Bates. Others maintain that the killings began in 1968, when a young couple, Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, were killed in a car at a remote spot in Benicia, California. Another couple, Darlene Farron and her friend Michael Mageau, were targeted near Vallejo. Farron died while Mageau survived, yet was unable to provide a useful description.
He was using a zip gun, a crude homemade gun.
Soon after, a person claiming to be the killer began sending taunting letters to local newspapers. Another couple in a car was stabbed in September 1969. Cecilia Shepard died, but Brian Hartnell survived and provided a chilling description of a man in a black hood with a circle and cross emblem.
The real concern that I have is that he doesn't do this again.
Many more letters, some containing mysterious ciphers, a possible police encounter with the killer, and more attacks followed, but no one was apprehended. Though the 340 cipher was cracked in 2020, it didn't point to a clear suspect. The case remains unsolved.